Winston. Okay. So,
Yeah.
how was the worksheet from last time?
It was good.
You got almost all of them right in the end, so that was good. I think
We
maybe
did
we'll
it.
do like one or two more sheets with 2 rounds of feedback, and then after that, you'll probably like get the drill, and then we'll do 1 round of
Okay.
feedback where I'll just give you the answers back at the end.
hmm Sounds
Okay,
good.
cool. So let's start with some kind of basic stuff about controlling important parts of the board.
hmm
The reason I think that we should focus on this is first of all, it sets up a really important idea that we'll look at later on today, and also it's related to the area where I think you were struggling a bit, which is just deciding like where do I want to put my pieces and when.
hmm
Sometimes it took a little bit of prompting to get you to use a piece that hasn't been used yet, and when selecting a good square, I think that was also a little bit difficult. So let's
hmm
see some examples, but from the other side, where your opponent has pieces on potentially good squares, and we want to deprive them of those good squares. So let's start
Okay.
with the same system, because I'm recommending
hmm
you to learn this opening, so we'll kind of kill some birds with stones this way. And let's say that you're playing black, okay? And I play knight f3. First of all, what move would you play here?
Uh,
There's more than one right answer, but there are some wrong
yeah.
answers too.
Probably just this.
Okay, this is a reasonable
hmm
one. Let's say I take this one.
hmm
Just we'll play a couple moves here. I just want to show you an idea.
Sure. So then, is this maybe something?
Well, if you do that, then you're going to
Ah, yeah.
block
Then
his
there's
center
a
pawn
fork.
again.
Yeah. Sure. So I go back and then
hmm
just go here instead.
That's true, but you also
Then it's
lost a
hanging.
pawn, right?
Yeah.
So if you play this move, I'll probably keep controlling the center more and develop my pieces faster
hmm
because I'm
Okay.
attacking your bishop.
Sure. So then is it just safest to yeet this over here? No, it's not, because then he'll just take my pawn for free.
Yeah, well, not for
So,
free
uh-huh.
because you
Oh
can
yeah,
take it
because
back.
I'll still capture back,
Yeah, but
but
at the
then
same
I'm also
time,
quite exposed over here.
also if you stop and take inventory, you'll see that
hmm
now I have one extra pawn, and you don't
Yeah.
have any reasonable prospect to get it back.
hmm
So if we keep in mind that when someone takes our pieces, we want to be able to take back that material a lot of the time. Not always. We'll see that really soon.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, if that's something that is generally true, we should be thinking
hmm
about how we can get our material back right away here.
Okay.
So you could just take this pawn on e4, right?
hmm
And that
Oh
would
yeah, I could.
keep it even.
hmm
But there's actually a problem with this. So this is a problem that's specific to this position. This doesn't happen that much. But let's say I play queen e2. I'm attacking your knight.
Sure.
What do you want to do about it?
Probably just run.
Run where?
Um, yeah, probably just back to where I was before,
Okay.
which feels a bit slow and doesn't actually
Yeah. This
develop anything.
this is an interesting position, at least from a learning standpoint. Here, white has a winning move.
Yeah,
So what do you think they should play?
move this in basically any direction besides up.
Um, wait, what is this? Because I can't see your cursor or anything.
Oh, okay. So yeah, just move the knight basically in a direction, and then
They're not all
he's
good.
already in check. Yeah.
Not all of the knight options are good. So what do you think is the
Right.
best option for that knight? You're on the right track though, because it's check whatever
Mm,
you do.
mm, I guess the one that lets me take the the black knight immediately afterwards.
Well, you remember how we talked about the values of the pieces last time?
hmm
If you take that knight, what's the best possible outcome? Like, let's say we do this, and then they just
hmm
save their king somehow. You can take
Yeah.
the knight now, but
hmm
how much material are you winning?
It's even.
Right,
It's
exactly.
a normal
So
trade.
when you have a discover attack like this, which is what it's
hmm
called when we move this one out of the way and it discovers some kind of attack on the king. When you have this
Right.
discover check, you want to try to attack the highest value thing that you can
Okay.
in a safe way.
Sure. Um, I mean, I'm gonna be safe no matter what because he's in check.
Sort
So,
of. There's one extreme case where they can save their king and defend against whatever knight move you
mhm.
make. So you don't want to put it on
Okay,
f7, for example, because then
makes
they
sense.
can solve both problems simultaneously.
Uh-huh.
They can take it. So, um, what else could you try here?
Mm, so am I supposed to just attack the queen square?
Yeah,
But
but
I mean, the queen can just run away and also block that way. So would it then be better to go g6?
well, let's think it over. Knight g6 would
Hmm.
definitely win the rook, but if we want to win the queen, let's see if it's
Hmm.
possible. You went a little bit quickly with that thought process. So, what was your
Okay.
move in mind to attack the queen?
Uh, knight c6.
Okay, and you thought they would save the queen, right? How would they do it?
So they, oh no, they don't save it. But then I also lose my queen if I decide to take it, right?
Try to
No,
go slowly
no, I
here.
don't.
What move do you think
Yeah.
they'll play?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. 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 So I thought they would just if I did that, then they would do that, and
Hmm.
then if I captured with that, then my queen would be gone, but I can still capture with this.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the winning sequence.
Hmm.
So it's good to slow down here, especially when you can see that you have tons of opportunity, right? This is a,
Hmm.
a rare chance to get a free attack on the king and something else at the same time.
Hmm.
And it's quite difficult to arrange this kind of situation by any other means, right? Can you imagine
Hmm.
some other way to get this knight like hanging but impossible to be taken and attacking the
Hmm.
most valuable piece? This is a really important opening trap, and it's a little bit difficult to justify it when you're just starting out. So for that reason, I like to avoid knight f6. But just before
Okay.
we go forward, I'm basically saying that knight f6, it's a good move. It follows all the principles, but it's practically tricky because of this specific tactic that we can run into.
Okay.
But um, there is a way to avoid all those problems, and it's to
Right.
insert a move here that helps you develop your pieces.
Okay.
So, what move do you think we could play that would still allow us to take the pawn on the next move? So it has to be an attacking move, so they don't have
Hmm.
time to defend that e pawn, right?
Right. Uh, I'm still thinking defensively because I'm tempted to do this just because it attacks
Mm-hmm.
the knight, but then it's not actually
You
what
think
you're
that's a
after, I
defensive
think.
kind of move?
Yeah.
How come? Because it looks to me like you're attacking the knight, and they probably have to go on the defensive themselves. Because they don't want to lose the knight for a pawn, right?
Hmm.
So if you play that move, right, I probably have to go back. I mean, I have
Okay.
options. I could also go
Yeah.
like here,
Hmm.
and if you're, I think in the modern opening theory, you can even play this move because it turns
Okay.
out it doesn't block the pawn forever. But don't worry about that.
Oh,
If I play
okay.
something
Sure.
like this, now you can take on e4. Do you see the
Okay.
difference?
Hmm.
Now, if I try this move, how do you protect your knight?
Mm. I see a couple of different ways to do it. So
Mm-hmm.
there's the bishop.
Okay.
There's also this one, but
Mm-hmm.
then this one's hanging, so I don't really like that.
Okay.
But then there's also this one, and
You
then I'm not sure which one is best.
you have one more too, which is this.
Oh,
Um,
okay, yeah.
but that doesn't mean that's the best one. So let's compare them
Hmm.
and see what the relative strengths and weaknesses are.
Hmm.
According to the opening principles we talked about, we probably want to get out a piece
Hmm.
and also protect our knight.
Yeah.
But there's a problem here. Do you remember what this is called when it's like these two pieces are lined up?
Yeah, it's pinned.
Yeah, it's a pin. So do you know how we usually punish someone for having a pin piece?
Attack from another direction.
You attack the piece repeatedly. You could
Ah,
also attack
okay.
in like various ways. Like here, I think you have multiple strong moves. But there's one really easy way. Whenever you see a pin piece, if you can attack it again, especially with a lower value piece, you'll usually win that piece right away. So how does white win a piece here?
Just d3.
Yeah, exactly. So applying the same logic, and we'll just go a little bit quickly here because I want to look at a couple other things. If they play this move, what does white play? Based on the same thing we just looked at, right? Does this move change anything about this being a pin?
Nope.
No, so we should still...
I'd still go for it.
Exactly. And if we play this one, never mind the fact that f5 exposes the king, we also play d3.
Yeah.
And what about this one? Does d3 win a piece here?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Or does it?
Is this still a pin?
No, not anymore.
Right.
But it is still, like...
It's a reasonable move.
Yeah.
But it doesn't win a piece.
So wait, no.
So this means that if you play this specific move order, we chase the knight away and then take the pawn, it's actually fine. Because if they attack our knight, we can block the pin and everything is safe. So this is not like an exception to the opening principles. It's just a very tricky situation to navigate when you're just starting out. So for that reason, I like to recommend that people play this one, which seems like it's slow for castling, but it's also important to avoid that tricky moment there with knight f6. So this is a very reasonable move, knight c6, and knight f6 is too, but this one's easier to play. And let's say that white plays knight c3. Not a very ambitious move, really. What would you play here?
I'd probably just complete the square.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. Now, this is what I thought you would say, and that's a good move. Now, let's say the white plays this. How does this fit in with the opening principles? Is it a good move for white or a bad move for white?
I think it's alright if they decide that they want to set up for attacking f7.
In that sense, it would be good, yeah.
But it's also quite well protected.
f7 is?
Yeah, I mean, it would potentially, like, force either the queen to move or the king to capture, and then castling couldn't happen. But...
Not castling is actually not as big of a deal as you might think.
Okay, sure.
It's much worse when the king is dragged out completely into the middle of the board, or when you forego your development for a very long time.
Okay.
But if someone sacrifices a minor piece for just one pawn and to mess up your castling, that's generally not very good.
Okay, sure.
There's even an extreme case that you might find instructive. So let me just set that up real quickly. So let's say they start like this, and we just do the same thing as them. This is a normal good opening position. Both sides have been controlling the center and developing, and then white says, Hail Mary, I'm gonna attack f7 a lot. How would you protect f7 in this case?
I can still castle, right?
Yeah, you just castle. Easy. Now, they might take this.
Yeah.
How do we defend against this move?
Just take it back.
Right, and now I'll take your rook.
And then, okay, this is leading to something.
So your king is out in the open now.
Yeah.
And the material, how does the material balance out? Do you remember what all the traditional point values are?
Yeah, okay, so black is up by 2.
By 2? How so?
So they have, unless I'm reading the pieces wrong, but it looks like a bishop and a knight, and then white has just a rook and a pawn. Right. So that's 6 points to 4.
Well, the rook is 5.
6 pawns to 4.
Rook is 5.
It's 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
The rook is almost twice as good as a minor piece, but not quite.
Okay.
So this actually shakes out even, right? But this position still ends up being better for black. This is a really good example to remember because, first of all, it happens often in practice. And it also shows you how the two minor pieces, they have the ability to attack one spot multiple times, which is really important. They also control more squares than just a rook and a pawn. So if you give them up for just the rook and the pawn, you usually end up worse off in that resulting position. You see here, white spent a lot of time, so black's development is way better. Without the bishop that used to be here, they're not controlling the light squares as well. Without the knight that used to be here, they're not controlling the dark squares as well. Black has a dominant position, even though their king is in a weird spot. And how would you fix that? Let's say you're not happy with your king on f7. What do you do?
Mhm. Would I just move him back to g8?
Yeah, you just go back to g8. And if you're feeling especially uncomfortable with that, you can go all the way to h8. It's not a big deal. You spend a couple of moves, but rook for knight and bishop is forever. So at least,
Plus, like, they still have two rooks, so I could be locking myself into some kind of checkmate if the stuff on my side ends up going somewhere else.
yeah. But since their attack is so far away, you have plenty of time to make sure that that doesn't happen, right?
Sure.
You can always bring another minor piece to defend your king if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a good illustrative example. And with that in mind, if the perfect coordination of the bishop and knight attacking f7 doesn't work out because you can castle, is this going to be a good move order? Where we move the knight multiple times and we're not threatening knight f7 right away even? How does it compare with that other line?
Which other line?
The one we just looked at. So we end up in this position. And,
Yeah.
and this happened because they sacrificed knight and bishop for rook and pawn. And in this position, it looks like they're beginning to try that same thing, but it's arguably a slower version because they're moving the knight twice in a row. They haven't brought the bishop yet. Black has flexibility to answer this. So do you think this is a better or worse version than the other one?
Sounds worse since you are developing fewer pieces.
Yeah. It could end up being exactly the same if black plays the same. For example, like if I play here, this is exactly the same position. If I flip back and forth, you'll see nothing changed. So, so if we do nothing about it, it's identical. But this brings me to my point here that, well, first of all, allowing them to execute their plan is actually good for you because if they give knight and bishop for rook, it's not great. But when someone brings their pieces over to your side of the board and they're unsupported, you can often just drive them back right away, so they never even get a chance to execute their plan. That way they don't get any kind of counterplay, and it disrupts their development even more. So since they don't yet have a bishop on c4, how can we make sure that knight cannot stay on g5?
Bring this pawn out.
Right. And do you think they should give it like this?
Does that still lead to the same sequence of moves then? And
It's
then
quite similar.
I'll still have to... I mean, I'm not in actually any danger at the minute because there is no bishop involved, so I'm not in check. But
Yeah.
I definitely don't want my queen to go.
Yeah.
So
how do you deal with this?
So I'll still capture it with king. Yeah.
And even if I check you, like, is this a problem?
No, I don't think so.
No, not really.
Yeah.
It would be nice if you could block this with a pawn, but unfortunately they have 3 covering that spot. So we can't really do it. We only have 2. So we have to just move the king again.
Sure.
So with this in mind, if you hit them with the pawn and they don't have any active threat, they have to go back to their own side. They can't stay there and linger to maybe one day get an attack on f7. So this position is the same as the position we had a moment ago with a big difference. So after knight f6, we have this position, right? And then, oh, hold on, wait, let me make this the main line for a second. Okay, so then a move later, we have the same position, but with one difference. What's the difference here? Or there's maybe 2 differences, actually.
Is it the lack of the bishops that would normally be out, or are we talking about a little bit earlier than that?
So I only mean the difference between um, this position right here
Mm-hmm.
and this position.
Okay.
So not like the other variation we were talking about, the same line but just a
Mm-hmm.
move earlier.
Okay. Well, then this is like a little bit stronger since one of your pawns is pushed out and you're covering this square.
Which square? Because I can't see it.
Uh, G5, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that's how I select things.
yeah. I think you have to do a right click or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So there's another difference that's also really important.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this move h6 in play. That's already good.
Mm-hmm.
And what else is different between these two positions?
Mm.
I'll give you a hint. If you're looking for it on the board, you won't find it. Whose move is it?
Okay, so it's Black's move and they have a chance to do something else.
Right. So we could play something like this, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's visually apparent like what the difference is here between white and black. You
Mm-hmm.
get the same position as before, but with but with an extra move, or two
Mm-hmm.
extra
Mm-hmm.
moves if you think about it, because
Nice.
here, black just played knight f6. They could have had this move in,
Mm-hmm.
but instead they went here, gave you an extra move, and then you get to go here. So if they want the same exact development for their side, it costs them much more time. They have to do
Yeah.
this, but now black has to play, and black is always going to be slightly ahead in the opening,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, if that actually materializes into something useful, that's up to you, because you have to
Mm-hmm.
convert all of that extra development at some point into something else, something tangible, like a checkmate or winning material tactics.
Okay.
There's a word in chess for when you gain time like this, and it's called gaining tempo. They
Mm-hmm.
just borrowed the same word from music. Um, and some kinds of moves are called tempo gaining moves.
Mm-hmm.
So this move h6 is an example of a tempo gaining move. The reason it's tempo gaining is that it does something that improves your position and forces them to make a concession at the same time. Moves that don't attack something and force them to make a bad move are not tempo gaining moves. Moves that attack them and force them to go to places they don't want to be are tempo gaining moves.
But if you waste too many moves trying to force someone to go back, then it's no longer tempo gaining.
Yeah, and so if the move that you played is not useful, then it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like
Okay.
that. And
Mm-hmm.
eventually the tempo doesn't matter, because
Okay.
you could like make a bunch of tempo winning moves, but then your position has no synergy. You're not actually able to convert it into something useful. But the concept is still pretty useful, even though tempo technically doesn't even exist, because one of the rules of chess is that you always have to make a move together with the opponent, right? It's always in move pairs, so you never actually get more moves. But you can get some funny situations. Let me show you an example that is more amusing than anything. Give me 1 second. I'm just setting up a position.
I'll call Winston.
Okay. The call of the Winston.
I'm just tapping my fingernails on the desk. Hello.
All right.
He's here.
So this position is possible,
Mm-hmm.
or is it? What do you think?
Looks like it.
All right. What did black do then?
So this came from here. This was castled at some point. And then
But black had
those
to do
two,
something,
Black had to do something.
right? Because one of the rules of chess is that white and black are alternating moves. So what did black do this whole
Oh.
time?
Was he literally just taking the knights like back and forth?
Yeah. The reason I use this example is it's kind of like a shocker moment where you're like, oh, is this really possible? Because it's so dramatic, the difference between white and black's position. Of course, the only way
Yeah.
it's possible is if black is making useless passes back and
Mhm.
forth. But it shows how even though tempo isn't a real thing, like, you know, we're both making moves, the quality of the moves is different. And that eventually can give you a feeling of who has a better position when they're ahead in development, even though they've technically made the same number of moves. So here,
So is this
white's moves
little
are all
hat
quality.
thing in white like where you mostly want your pieces to be in the opening?
Could you say it again? I don't think I understood the first part.
Yeah. So is this position for white kind of what you want
This is an
your
example of what you would want.
Okay.
Um, there are probably like countable number of positions that or setups that are really good, but they're heavily specific on what your opponent did. But if
Mm-hmm.
your opponent's doing nothing at all, this is pretty good because you're just maximizing
Okay.
control of those center squares, and then
Uh-huh.
you can go forward from there.
Oh yeah, because then you have all this
Yeah,
and then
fully
also this.
controlled, and multiple times
Okay.
also. Some
Yeah.
squares it's just like impossible for black to take it over.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see an example of this concept of tempo in action, and this will also help you get a good idea of like where do my pieces belong, and even some exceptions to the rules.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this next game that we're going to look at is one that was played by Paul Morphy, who was a famous player in the 1800s. Some
Mm-hmm.
some people have said that Paul Morphy was the most accurate chess player who ever lived, which is sort of strange considering he was the son of a lawyer in New Orleans in like 1850,
Mm-hmm.
and there was not really any chess culture going on. So he didn't really have anyone to learn from, but he rose to prominence quickly at a young age, and so he's like the original child prodigy of chess. And
Nice.
chess was something that he was just doing casually during the 3 years that he had to wait to become 18 so he could become a lawyer too, because he finished
Mm-hmm.
his lawyer education at 15. So he ended up traveling the world and playing lots of people in chess and beating basically everybody in Europe, and then coming back and being like, chess is boring. I just want to be a lawyer. But because he'd become so famous in chess, no one ever wanted to like take him seriously as a lawyer, and it kind of ruined his life, which is
Mm-hmm.
an interesting plot twist. But he played
Hmm.
some really great games that are super instructive, and this is one of his more obscure games, but it's really perfect for illustrating this concept that we're going to look at. So
Okay.
Paul Morphy had white. He was playing a guy
Mm-hmm.
named McConnell. I don't think he's famous for anything. He's just like a chess master. I think he was from Britain,
Mm-hmm.
and he's mostly famous for losing to Morphy, I guess.
Okay.
And he chose something dubious in this game. He brought his queen out early on f6.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows why he chose to do this, but this move is named after him. This is the McConnell variation.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I wanted something named after me, I wouldn't pick this, but beggars can't be choosers.
I guess.
So, just in review, why is this move maybe classically considered not so great?
So you're blocking this pawn? Although I guess it doesn't matter if you're gonna castle in
Do
that
you want to move
direction.
that pawn usually?
No.
Yeah, the f
But
pawn. We talked about how that can lead to some trouble, right?
right.
It has a
So
it has a time, but not here.
mhm. I think it's all right, but it is also moving your queen too early since we talked about knights first, then bishops, then rooks, and then the queen.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. And
but
castling somewhere in the
otherwise,
mix before the queen. Yeah.
mhm.
So
Otherwise, like it's opening up stuff and it's activating something.
just in terms of the opening principles, it does have the downside that it is not helping you to castle very well, because
Hmm.
castling long is something that's slow, especially as black, because you're already one move behind. So it's especially important for black to castle quickly. For white, you have much more luxury of choice because it's hard
Hmm.
for you to get in trouble in the first couple of moves. But for black, it's definitely super important.
Right.
It also interrupts the knight from going to his most natural square.
Hmm.
So in the future, it could end up being problematic for your uh, development and center control. So that being said, how do we punish a move like this? It turns out that the key concept that you use to punish early queen moves is tempo.
Hmm.
See, if you are attacking pieces willy-nilly, it's not necessarily the case that they're going to elicit a reaction. Let's
Hmm.
pivot back to that other chapter real quick and see some examples. So let's say that you wanted to gain a tempo here as white, and you say, aha, I'm going to attack your knight. Now you better run away. I gain tempo. Does black have to react at all?
No.
No, they don't. And the reason why?
So they have 2 pawns protecting it.
And they're equal value pieces. That's an important detail.
Okay.
Imagine if the knight was considered more valuable than the bishop. You know, maybe there's some endgame theory magic, and the knight is better in our new universe. They would have to move the knight, right? And so the bishop b5 move would be a tempo gaining move. Now let's say white plays the move d4. Does this gain a tempo?
No.
Does it have a threat?
No.
It does have a threat, actually. The way that you can tell if a move has a threat is you imagine what happens if they get to go again.
Okay, sure.
So
so then it's just attacking e5.
Right, so we would probably just take that on the next move. Therefore, black has to react. So d4 could be considered a tempo gaining move. The caveat is that if they take here on d4, you probably are also obligated to spend an extra move to capture it. So it's like you're just giving and taking a tempo from each other in this particular example. But that's just, you know, a quick example. Let's come back to the game. So we want to somehow gain tempo by attacking the queen, which means we have to attack it with lower value pieces in a safe way. But every piece is lower than the queen except for the queen.
Right.
So it's actually pretty easy to do that. You just have to pick ways where you can do it safely. And also put your pieces on useful squares while you do it. So what should white do?
Actually d4 doesn't seem too bad now.
d4 is a reasonable move, yeah. Because you're threatening to take on e5. But black can play a useful move to defend against this. They can play a move like d6 or knight c6 even. You know, maybe we would play like this. This particular case would allow you to gain a tempo. So how can you gain a tempo here, even though you can't take on e5 safely?
Should I just take anyway?
Well, no, because if you take and they take back, you could consider that as an improvement of their knight, because now their knight is standing in the center and preventing.
Okay, I just saw it, so I can just go here, and then if she attacks, then I take with the knight.
Yeah, this is an example of a move that gains some tempo. I think that after queen g6, they are also getting a tempo, so you have to be a little bit careful. There's another way that also makes sense, but has no real downsides. Bishop g5 is a fine move. I just want you to find another example.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be on the queen.
So should I just move this forward?
Right, and then the knight doesn't have an obvious good way to improve itself, because when it comes to this side of the board, this should look familiar because of the earlier example that we did. The knight's on our side, it's all by itself. How do we like chase it back?
Just throw either of these pawns forward.
Yeah, whichever one you would prefer to be on that square. You just get an extra move and the knight has to go back. You could even leave the knight there in a sort of passive-aggressive way for a little while. But I think when you're first starting out, it's probably more useful to just get rid of the knight so you don't have to think about it anymore. That way, nothing's complicated. They just go back. The knight looks silly on the edge of the board because knights control fewer squares when they're on the edge. And, you know, it's your move again, so you can do whatever you want here. That's a really important thing. You always get to move again after doing that. So these are some examples of getting a tempo. For that reason, after d4, they should probably play a move like this, and then you don't have any more tempo gaining moves. Well, you have bishop g5, but this has a little bit of a downside in that they're threatening to get a tempo back themselves. But that's a sort of nuanced point. It's not that important. There's another move here which gains a tempo in a sort of subtle way, and it's knight c3. This is what was played. This is not an obvious tempo winning move because it's threatening to play knight d5, which is good, but it's not happening right away. So you might wonder, why does black even have to react to this move? Well, if they play a move like knight e7 to prevent it, then they're going to run into some development problems because they can't move their bishop on f8 anymore. And this is a logical consequence of the queen being on f6, because it's blocking the knight from going into its most natural square. So black is coordinating very poorly, and white didn't even do anything special. They just brought their knight into the game. So it's kind of a fake out. Like, black has to put their pieces in stupid squares just to answer normal moves from white.
Okay.
In the game, they played c6 to prevent it entirely. But c6 is not that useful of a move. What do you think the downside is for c6?
It's a bit slower at developing your not pawns.
Yeah, so it's a move that we spend not developing the pieces. That makes sense.
Yeah, and it's also where the left side knight wants to go.
Yeah, exactly. So the queen's knight wants to go on c6 to control the center, but it's not doing it. All right, that makes sense. Now here we can play d4 somewhat more effectively because, well, you'll see. In this position, they should probably play a move like d6, like what we had analyzed a second ago. They should probably just protect that pawn. But they took it. Probably not expecting white's reply.
Okay.
The move pawn takes d4, it attacks the knight. It gets rid of this potentially weak e5 pawn. So black probably thought this was advantageous for them.
Right.
But white is on the move, so they can actually gain tempo instead of bothering to take the pawn.
Yeah.
So what move do you think we should play?
e5?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
And sometimes these advancing pawn moves are not strong because you could get overextended. But in this case, it's already supported by a knight, and black's development is pretty poor. So it's hard to imagine you really getting in trouble here for doing that.
Okay.
So they have to move the queen again. This is the second time they've moved the queen in the game, and it turns out they'll move the queen many more times. So let's gain another move by attacking this queen. What'll it be?
So I see several ways to do it, but most of them involve this.
Which one do you have in mind?
Probably the bishop, since it's not as valuable.
Yeah, if you put queen there, does it really gain a tempo?
No.
Why not?
But this allows me to castle a bit faster. The bishop does.
Yeah. I just want to highlight again how, since these are same value pieces, it's not tempo winning.
Yeah.
So only bishop d3 is right. But this move has a downside. You might remember the first game that we looked at, played by Greco. It involved a pawn sacrifice for development. This move also entails a pawn sacrifice. What do you think black will play here?
Oh.
They have to save the queen, so what's the best move?
Maybe eat this.
Right. So in the game with Greco, black brought their bishop to b7 and then took on g2. So they had a bishop there. Now with a queen on g2, it's even more dangerous for white. But that doesn't mean that it's automatically bad. By the way, I also gave you a puzzle on your worksheet where the answer is queen takes g2. So clearly this is a nuanced situation. It's not always good or always bad to allow queen takes g2. You have to consider the whole rest of the position. It's not just the move itself that is important. So here, how good is black's position at the moment? Aside from their threat to take the rook on h1. Like, besides that, is everything else going well for them?
Not really.
No, not really, because all of their pieces are on the back rank. And we would really need to get them all out. You're not going to win the game with a single queen.
Right.
I mean, you could, but they'd have to play extremely poorly, and we don't study to beat the people who play extremely poorly. So I think here white's move is pretty much forced. What do you think white will do?
Castling is illegal.
Yeah, very illegal. You're going to get a red card if you castle.
Yeah. I'm tempted to move the king, but I'm not sure whether to move it to d2 or e2.
Why is that the first thing that comes to your mind?
So if I were black, then for the next move, I'd probably just want to take the rook at h1.
Yeah, that makes sense. But then why move the king?
So that would put him in check, and I don't have an immediate answer to
Oh, but it's white's move right now.
what the queen is. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So why are we moving the king immediately? Because you think we have to on the next move anyway, or
That was my thought, but
okay?
I guess there's another way to just both attack this and
Well,
also block the king.
this is just a
But
defending move though. White's
yeah.
position is really good, so why should we be on the defensive
Mhm.
automatically here? If
Mm.
if you're resigning yourself to go up the rook, it's good to spend time and make sure that you really have to before you do.
Okay.
So what other option do we have here? Something that just doesn't lose the rook. Getting checked in and of itself is also not a bad thing. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that if you're worried about getting checked on the next move, it's probably more important to attend to the other details. Like losing a piece is forever, but check is just one move.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I can just throw the rook here.
Try to
So
be a little
that
bit more ambitious. That would be a fine move because it protects the rook, but you can do better than
uh-huh.
that.
Okay.
You can do something that is defending and attacking. This is actually what Morphy was most famous for. He's really good at seamlessly combining the defense with the attack. So it's good to try to emulate that in your own games too. What's an attacking move with the rook?
Here?
Yeah, and why can't they take it?
Oh, because the okay.
Yeah, exactly. So it's actually safe to go there. And even if this is something that's tricky to notice initially, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Just take your time to make sure that you're not missing any options like this in the future.
Okay.
You'll get more used to this over time. It's inherently difficult for people to notice that pieces move backwards. There's this cognitive bias that seems to be pretty pervasive. There's a book about these kinds of psychological weaknesses that's called Forcing Chess Moves. It's one that I recommend for people who've already been playing chess for a few years.
Okay.
It's definitely insightful about how human psychology plays into how hard a puzzle is. Obviously, for computers, all puzzles are like a similar level of difficulty. It's just like how many nodes did I have to run for how long to find this move?
Yeah.
Well, I guess some are biased when you're using algorithms, but
Yeah.
that's all on a side.
But you can't exactly do breath first on bullet, for example.
Yeah. But Bullet's not even real chess, in my opinion. Bullet's more like chess entertainment. Okay.
Sure.
So here, black can only play queen h3.
Mm-hmm.
So this is their, let's see, 1, 2, 3, fourth queen move in a row. And meanwhile, white has developed both knights and their bishop. The next couple of moves are kind of hard to guess, not that instructive, so I'm going to show you. Morphy decided that his rook was better on g5, so he went ahead and made it there with tempo.
And he just kept going.
Yeah. Black could probably have defended more tenaciously by either putting the queen here, which he probably didn't want to do because of the queen's vulnerability on that square as well. Or when rook g5 happened, they could have put it here, but this is also scary because of the bishop attacking the queen. So they chose a sort of subpar move. And it's not like it's immediately punishable. It's just that there are options that could have prolonged the game more, I think. So gaining tempo is still the name of the game. So how do we improve our pieces with an attack on the queen here? Now it's a little bit harder.
Okay. So now I see two bishop moves. One of them goes here, the other one goes here.
Yeah.
And both of them are supported by either the king or the rook.
Yeah. So which one do you think looks better?
I heard somewhere that the bishops like the back rank, so I'd probably just put it there.
Bishops are pretty good on the back rank. Bishop f1 is what Morphy played here. Bishop f5 I think is objectively a better move, but they're very similar. Like I would say that if you picked either of these moves, you got the right move for this position. It's just Morphy
Okay.
chose a different one.
Mm-hmm.
Now here the queen went to e6,
Mm-hmm.
and we can still gain more tempo by attacking this queen. So how do we do it?
Pawn looks very tempting.
Pawn? Which pawn?
Yeah, the black pawn that I can capture with one of the knights.
Yeah. So does that move also gain tempo?
Looks like it.
It does. So that's the move we should play. Knight takes d4, attacking the queen
Mm-hmm.
again. So this queen knows no
Mm-hmm.
rest. It's already moving like 6-7 times. It's probably very frustrating for them.
Yeah.
I think there's also evidence in the game that they became psychologically frustrated and well, of course, frustration is psychological, but I mean, like, the psychology aspect of the game became really important because they missed a really good opportunity in the next couple of moves.
Mm-hmm.
On this move, Morphy played probably the only, like, one of the only 4 moves of the game that was not attacking something directly. He decided to improve his knight on c3.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you think he picked to improve this knight?
Mm. So the only center square that doesn't lead to it being threatened by the pawn would be e4.
Yeah, this is what he chose.
Mm-hmm.
But based on the opening principles that we talked about, you might think this is kind of a weird decision because Morphy hasn't developed his bishop on c1 yet. He hasn't gotten the rook on a1 into the game. He hasn't moved his queen yet. So why do you think he chose to improve this knight instead of developing those other pieces? What could be more important than that?
So I see that he can possibly attack this square
Is
the
that
next
useful,
turn.
good thing?
Actually, yes.
How come?
Assuming nothing moves,
Right.
if white went twice,
Mm-hmm.
then it'd be both attacking the bishop and the king.
Mm-hmm.
And then if the queen took it, then this is still supported by the pawn at e5.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the cases where we don't follow these opening principles, like getting all the pieces out, controlling the center, it's when something more important is at stake. And in this case, we can transfer our development advantage already to an attack on the king. So this is why it's knight e4 and not, for example, bishop f4 or bishop e3.
Okay.
So knight e4 was a good move, and black squandered their chance to do something useful by playing h6. The reason this is squandering, even though it's attacking the rook and you'd think the rook has to move, is that white can make more powerful threats here. Knight d6 would have been a really good move, but Paul Morphy played knight f5, or at least that's what the recording of this game says. I suspect that it's an error because Morphy almost never made crazy errors like this. But knight f5 is a mistake. Black finally had a chance to do something useful here. So what do you think it should be? Let's just pretend we're black for a second.
So I can see a check here. I can see that
What will happen if you play queen b4 check?
so if that were to happen, then I guess it would force the bishop out from c1 to d2.
Okay. And then what's your follow-up?
Or otherwise, maybe you'd push the pawn over here.
Yeah, maybe c3 as well. I think either way, black has the same response.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that should be?
So then if it's here, then queen would still have to back off because otherwise it's just a free queen. If
That doesn't mean you have to back off.
Yeah,
Those are
no,
both
that's true.
true things in some sense, but
Okay, so she's over here,
on
and then
b4.
that means that she can just capture the knight over there,
Yeah, that's right.
and then this becomes another check.
So, do you remember what it's called when you do something like this? There's a terminology for
Lightning
this.
attack?
No, no, not lightning attack. That's a very specific thing in the opening.
Okay, okay.
It does have some similarity though, because you're attacking the king and you're winning a piece. But
Yeah.
they usually call this double attack or fork.
Okay.
I usually reserve the word fork for knight moves, but people use the word fork for whatever. Tenedor, at any rate, we're going to take this knight for free. So that's your double attack or your fork.
Okay.
But if you play this move, they can actually defend both threats. So how do you think white should attempt that?
So they should just move this one into, or move the knight that's being attacked into either of these spots.
Which two?
And since
'Cause I
this
can't
one
see.
is supported by pawn, then it's...
Yeah, I think this is the better option. But black is still winning here.
Yeah.
So what's black's winning move now?
Still go and put the king in check again?
Yeah, I will take your queen.
Ah, okay.
Nope. Knight's not pinned anymore if you move the queen.
Yeah. Okay.
Even if you did, like, let's pretend the knight, stepped on some glue or gum or something. You can also develop a piece and defend your king. So this shouldn't be that enticing. It's just a check.
Okay. Sure. Oh yeah, so then there's still this.
Exactly. So either Morphy missed this in a very rare lapse of reason, or the notation for this game is wrong, historically. The reason I suspect that it's incorrect is that if he had started like this, it would come out like quite similarly. But anyway, so he did this, and this guy, either this didn't actually happen, or he was dazed and confused from being attacked so many times, and he played this move. Which, of course, allows us to continue with putting a knight right here, attacking the king. They took. What's the best way to take back?
With the other knight?
Yeah, with tempo, right? We should just keep attacking. If you play the other moves, it's not attacking anymore, and you lose a piece. So we should do it this way. The king went here. It might have been more resilient not to go there, but we'll just forget about that for now. So again, tempo is still the name of the game. This whole game is just like tempo moves, attacking, rapid fire. So how do we keep the attack going?
So I see a fork over here.
What's the downside of that move,
though? Oh, it's not supported by any piece.
Yes.
Okay, so...
So how do you fix that? You're on the right track, though. It's a nice idea.
Okay.
You just need some support somehow.
Okay, so then I would start with this, maybe.
This move's a little bit slow, because it doesn't come with tempo exactly. Like, you're threatening knight f7, but after this move, black's position is very poor, so it's hard for me to really endorse their position whatsoever. But like, let's say they go, actually here there's this double attack.
Okay,
that would be pretty fatal. But they also could play like king c7. So rook g7, not as fast as we might like. Let's keep bullying that queen, because the queen is so high value. We can really do whatever we want when we're attacking that queen.
Sure. Okay, so then I see either queen g4 or bishop f3.
I think that neither of those are tempo winning moves.
Okay.
So queen g4 is not, because they're same value pieces.
Oh right, yeah. Okay. So then.
And what about bishop h3? Why not? Why not that one?
This one's just not supported at all.
Exactly. So.
Okay. So then.
You're getting warmer though.
Okay, so this one is supported if I take bishop f1 to...
Right, so
c4.
Again with the knight moving backwards, it supports the bishop. So they really can't take it. I mean, they could, but it would be still a hopeless position. Like, they can get a rook and a bishop for a queen, which is probably the right thing to do in such a bad position. But it also leaves them with no hope of a comeback. We can just start developing our pieces however we want. White has full control. Everybody's still on the back rank. Very sad position. So, queen e7 was their choice. and we can still do all the tempo attacky stuff.
Okay.
Your idea was knight f7, right? So now we can do it.
Okay.
They went here. This is a major juncture in the game. So far, the early part of the game could be characterized as a ruthless attack on the queen. Mm-hmm. The queen came out in the open, and we attacked it like 17 times and reached this position, almost by force. I mean, there were some deviation points, but I think when black was playing a lot of just like very obvious moves, and white was just attacking the queen, very simple, logical chess. This part of the game, we switch from attacking the queen to attacking the king. So it's the conversion of one advantage to another. Mm. If we take the rook on h8, this is not an alternative way of playing. What do you think is wrong about just taking the rook?
I mean, I can see that it leads to our rook being taken.
Yeah. Do you know why this is a problem? Because on the surface, it's just a trade, right? So who cares? Mm-hmm. What's the big deal about that? The problem here is that you had a position where all of your pieces were positioned very well. Mm-hmm. So here we're attacking the king and controlling squares near the king with the knight. Mm-hmm. It's very useful. Our rook was actively placed. It's controlling the 5th rank, and it even has the ability to go forward or backward along this G file. Whatever square ends up being useful, the rook has very high mobility. The bishop is doing really well. Of course, that didn't change in that sequence we were looking at, so we can stop praising the other pieces. But you can see like all of white's pieces are doing super well here. But in just one move, we put our knight in the corner and lose our active rook, and we don't gain any material. Mm-hmm. You could maybe get confused thinking like, okay, I'm gonna win this this knight here, but I have 2 issues with that. The first issue is that I think you might be losing a piece now after this move.
Okay.
I didn't look at it too hard, but like it's attacking both in a line, which is that's either a pin generally or a skewer or a double attack, something awful. Yeah. But on top of that, if your position is so good, why are you not going after the king? Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's good to stop and pick up a piece along the way, just so that if you make a mistake later, you can always recover material-wise. Mm-hmm. But in this case, there is a way to just brutally attack the king and finish the game immediately. It takes a few moves, but every move is like just tempo moves attacking the king. So here, how do we attack the king in one move safely?
Safely?
Yeah, it's a hard question.
Okay.
But you can do it. I believe in you.
I see stuff that's happening in 2 moves.
Okay.
But for one, I don't know how safe it is because it could still get captured. But
are you losing material?
It's still protected. No, it's even.
Are you maintaining the attack?
I guess I am.
Then what's the move?
Queen.
Yep.
D6.
That's the right move.
Okay.
So good job. Hard move, but you got it first try. So they took this one because they want to get more pieces off the board. Oftentimes when you're much worse, if you can trade pieces, the attack goes away. So that's probably where they're coming from. What's the best way to take back?
Just with the pawn.
Yes, because it's attacking them. Good. Now they only have one move, and it's to go here.
Okay.
And once you see the king running out in the open like this, when all of white's pieces are active, this is a surefire sign that the end is near. You should start calculating for checkmate when you get positions like this.
So it's just here? Oh, hi, Winston.
That's good. Is that game over, or is it still going?
It's going, but not for that long, I think.
All right, what does black play? Yeah, they have to play this. And now what? How do we keep going from here?
Winston's covering half the board with his butt.
Yeah, I see that. Come on, Winston. Don't you know we're playing chess? Winston just looks shook. He's like, why can I not stand on the chess? Winston, if you're going to be on the chessboard, you have to solve the position.
Can you do it?
Come on, Winston. What's the answer? He's like, I am dead to the world.
Unhand me.
Winston is such a cow.
He is.
Black and white, looks kind of sleepy, probably chewing on something at any given moment.
He
That's a
actually
cow.
likes grass. He likes lettuce and spinach and
Like a
the
cow.
sort.
I think we've discovered his secret.
He also
Winston is
likes
cow.
being spanked lightly.
Also like cow.
Okay, so so that's still
Alright,
because he can't take back.
so what's next? This is obviously a good move. I think you could play that
Mm-hmm.
without thinking too hard in any position.
Mm-hmm. Mm, hmm. So he only has one move
Mm-hmm.
left that I can see.
There are two moves. This one
Two.
has this one has a photo finish, so let's actually address this
Mm-hmm.
one first. This is not
Mm-hmm.
what they played in the game because it ends in
Mm-hmm.
one move. What's the bone crushing checkmate move here? Hey, that's not it. There we go.
Winston, no.
Come on, Winston. You can't set us back to the beginning of the game.
He sat
Silly
on
cat.
the arrow key.
That'll do it.
Uh,
Winston's on the warpath. He'll be back. Come on, Winston. This is the critical moment of the game. Can't you see we're trying to calculate here? How are we supposed to checkmate with Winston jumping in the way? Come on, Winston.
mm, is it okay to go there? I think it's okay. But then, no, it's not okay because then I was thinking of here with the knight, but then king can just escape over there.
No, not there. Because if
Hmm.
you play this and they go here, you can take the king,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, okay.
So, but there is a problem with that move.
Hmm.
Different problem. So look carefully. What move can the king play?
So he just moved that way and then, okay, so then, is it over here?
Yeah, that's it. So
Okay.
this would be the win if they play king c6.
Uh-huh.
The king is blushing because he's embarrassed that it's checkmate. If you went this way, the problem is that the bishop's hanging. I'm not sure you spotted that.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
there's,
yeah,
there's
since
another
I'm
cognitive
blocking.
bias where people
Uh-huh.
they say like, okay, that piece cannot be taken, and that becomes like a rule in their mind temporarily,
Hmm.
and then they fail to notice when the rule no longer applies. That's
Okay.
a typical kind of invisibility psychologically
Hmm.
speaking, but this move is obviously really good.
Okay.
So black fought on with this move king a5,
Hmm.
and this is probably the hardest calculation moment of the game because the move that Morphy played here is not an obvious attacking move, but it ends the game by forcing two moves.
Hmm.
So let's see if we can find it. I don't want to give you too many hints because this is a really good exercise, but we know it's mate
So I
in
can't
two.
stale either.
No stalemate. Well, here stalemate's not even possible because they have so many pieces to
No.
move.
Sure.
To be in stalemate, you need to have no possible moves, not just no king moves.
Hmm. All right, so I've ruled out these two because in either of these I'll get taken, and then in B4, the bishop is hanging as well.
Right.
So,
So bishop b6 and bishop b4 are both out. That makes
hmm.
sense.
And then pawn B4 is interesting, but it doesn't really solve anything, I guess.
What will they play?
So if I were to go pawn b4, then the king could escape to a4.
And, well, it's checkmate in 2 moves, not 1 move. So if you
Oh,
play b4, king a4, do you have a
uh-huh.
checkmating move there?
I probably do. Let me see.
Well, don't play it out.
Okay,
It's important to try to visualize it.
sure.
No.
Uh,
There we go.
okay. So I went here, he went there,
Right.
and then
Using arrows or moving pieces is kind of like,
a crutch.
yeah, it's a bit of
Mhm.
a crutch when you're training. So it's important to try to avoid that temptation.
Right.
The
Okay.
ultimate crutch
Cool.
is using the engine. So just like never use it. At least until
Because
you're like
otherwise
really
you'll
strong.
be like 1900 rating and you won't know how you got there.
Yes.
Okay, so there, there. Does that actually work? So if my pawn's here, then I'm covering a5 and c5. Bishop covers b3 and b5,
One
and
thing that
then
might
this
help
is
here
covered here.
is
Uh-huh.
that we can already see that the bishops form this box,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if we play b4, we cover this one. But how are we going to cover the square a4?
So I just thought about moving the bishop at c5 one square back, but then I think that just leads to that bishop being taken.
Yeah.
But
But right now it seems like you're calculating in circles a little bit. So let me help you clarify your thought process.
hmm
So first of all, what we're trying to create here is sometimes called a mating net.
hmm
The idea is that the pieces form a net of squares around the king
okay.
that are fully under control.
hmm
And if you can close that net by filling in the gaps, then it's a checkmate.
Okay.
So
Sure.
moves that open up holes in the net are not necessarily priority moves. They might
hmm
be good, but you have to be able to like still finish the deal afterwards. So
hmm
here the bishops are actually ideally placed.
Okay.
B4 is a tempting move, and that's why I kind of honed in on it for the calculation,
hmm
because it helps fill in one of the squares in your net. We had all of
Yeah.
these before, and we filled in this one.
hmm
Now we have to calculate the sequence then to see if it actually finishes them off. So they can play king a4.
hmm
And what are all the ways to attack the king on a4?
It would probably just be bishop here,
Yeah, don't play it.
but I don't think.
Yeah. So we could do this, but the downside is they will take it, right?
hmm
Okay. Now, what's the downside if we play bishop b3? Same thing, but they can't take it, right? So what's the
hmm
big deal? Is that the answer, or is it something else?
I think it's something else because the king can still escape through the back. The
What
net
square?
moved a bit, right?
Yeah. What square will it
hmm
go to, though?
Um, a6,
A3, right? Because
a3.
we
Okay.
played b4 first, so
hmm
they can't go to a6.
Ah,
The
right.
net
Yeah.
might move with the king.
Uh-huh.
That's okay.
hmm
It tightens around wherever the king is going.
Okay.
So if we play b4, king a4, bishop b3, they can play king a3.
Okay.
That's a problem. The pawn on b4
Yeah.
is blocking the bishop.
hmm
Also, if the pawn goes to b4, it's no longer covering that part of the net. It's actually kind of nice that these pawns are building a wall.
Yeah.
So we've ruled
Okay.
out bishop b6, bishop b4, and we don't need to revisit them. And we've ruled out
So
b4.
if he's only in this small box right now, then I'm pretty much free to move more or less where I want, unless he starts moving other stuff.
No, you're right. Like their king is totally stuck on the edge here. It's very difficult
hmm
for them to actually make an escape path.
hmm So if
So
I were to play this, would they still try to threaten something here?
probably because
Okay,
what else are they going to do?
true.
What's your next move now?
Uh, that.
Yeah, good. This is almost exactly how the game ended. So good job. That's
hmm
the answer. He played rook g3 first,
Mm-hmm.
b5 was their choice of losing move, and then rook a3 mate. So a pretty aesthetic ending to the game, if I say so myself. I really like this game. It's a great example of, first of all, in the beginning, the developing moves, because very few of the moves that Morphy made are actually like extravagant or unintuitive for someone who just learned how to play. You know, knight c3, totally normal. The most interesting thing about this move is its timing, because it's threatening to go on d5. So it kind of steals a move from black in that sense. D4 is totally normal, because we normally want to do this to develop our bishop and attack the center. Now, the part where it starts to become more like you need to actually know some concepts to do this thing is you need to know that it's okay to let your knight hang for several moves, as long as you create greater or equal threats. So we create some greater threats. Sacrificing this pawn is probably the hardest thing until the very end of the game, that we have to know that it's okay to give up a pawn if we can get several moves in a row. Sometimes people say that 3 free developing moves is worth a pawn. I think it doesn't hold very, very robustly, but it's a useful idea that, like, if you get at least 3, if you get something like 5, it's probably good compensation for the pawn, as long as you make something of it. So, and then the rest of this is just like, we bully the queen, playing very obvious moves. We have to forgive Morphy for this one blunder, but then it switches to attack on the king and the queen. Nothing too crazy, until maybe this part where we have to find this mate in 2, which involves a quiet move. This move doesn't really scream to be played, because the only reason is you see that this move is mate. So it's a pretty clear example of all this tempo winning stuff that we've been going over. Do you have any questions about this?
Not right now.
Okay. Do you think you could apply this in your own games?
I hope so.
Yeah. It depends a little bit on help from your opponent, but winning in chess always depends on help from your opponent. They always have to make some mistake. But you can punish their mistakes with tempo pretty often. The situations where that happens is when they bring out their queen early, which a lot of people around your rating level do, or when they leave their pieces hanging out in the open, like in the examples where I just moved the knight a couple times. So those are very typical situations where you can do exactly what Morphy did in this game.
Cool.
All right, cool. I'll send you another worksheet which will have a few things related to this on it, and a few other extra learning things as well. Okay, I think I'll stop the recording right here. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.